It was the middle of a blistering summer when my life took an unexpected and unsettling turn. I had just turned 19, and although I had moved away for college, I was back home for the summer. It felt weird coming back to the house where I had spent so much of my childhood, especially now that my dad had remarried. I hadn't been around much since my dad's second marriage, and my relationship with my stepmom, Carla, was still somewhat distant. She was a beautiful woman, much younger than my father, and there was something about her that made me uneasy, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Our family had a small property just outside the town, and ever since Carla had moved in, she'd brought along her horse, Star, which she seemed to cherish more than anything else. Star was a large, majestic creature with a black mane that gleamed under the sun. Carla would often spend hours at the stable grooming him, feeding him, and riding him in the fields. I admired how close she was to the horse, but something always felt off about the way she behaved around him. It was as if Star was more than just a pet or a companion to her. One day, I came home early from a summer job I had taken at a nearby farm, and as usual, I saw Carla making her way toward the stable. She had a strange look in her eyes as she glanced around to make sure no one was watching her. I thought nothing of it at first. Maybe she was just protective of her horse, or maybe she was just a private person. But something gnawed at me, a sense that there was more to this than met the eye. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. The house was quiet, my dad was working late, and Carla had spent most of the day in the stable. I decided to go outside and check on things, not entirely sure why. As I neared the stable, I heard soft whispers. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I knew it was Carla's voice. Peeking around the corner, I saw her standing beside Star, her hand gently running down his sleek, muscular body. She whispered something to him that sent a chill down my spine. I shouldn't have stayed, I know that now, but I was frozen in place. What I saw next shocked me to the core. Carla wasn't just touching her horse in a way that seemed affectionate or innocent. Her hands moved in ways that were wrong, inappropriate. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing, and when I did, a wave of nausea washed over me. This was not just a woman caring for her animal. This was something twisted, something I couldn't unsee. In disbelief, I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt betrayed, confused, and sick all at once. What was Carla doing? Why would she behave like this? I knew I had to get out of there before she noticed me, so I slipped away quietly, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to confront. For the next few days, I avoided Carla as much as possible. I couldn't look her in the eye without feeling disgusted, and the image of her with the horse haunted me day and night. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell my dad? Should I confront her? It was a terrible secret to carry, and I felt trapped under the weight of it. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, my dad announced that he would be going on a business trip for a few days. Carla smiled warmly, but I could see something flicker behind her eyes, a look of relief, maybe. I wasn't sure. My dad asked if I could help Carla with the chores while he was away, and although I wanted nothing to do with her, I nodded, knowing I had little choice. The first night after my dad left, I couldn't sleep. The house was eerily quiet, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Carla and Star in that stable, her hands moving in ways they shouldn't. I tossed and turned, my mind spinning with questions. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? Should I confront her? I didn't want to cause a scene, but I also couldn't live with what I had seen. Unable to sleep, I finally decided to go for a walk to clear my head. The moonlight cast long shadows across the yard as I made my way toward the stable, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know why I was going there. Maybe I wanted to catch her again. Maybe I wanted to confront her. I wasn't sure. As I approached the stable, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and anger as I pushed it open, bracing myself for what I might find. To my shock, Carla was there, and she wasn't alone. She was with Star again, her hands moving across his body in that same inappropriate way. Before I could stop myself, I let out a gasp. Carla's head whipped around, her eyes wide with shock and fear as she saw me standing there. For a moment, we were both frozen in place, staring at each other in silence. Then, without a word, she straightened up, her face turning pale, "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning, and I felt like I was going to be sick. "I saw you," I finally managed to choke out. "I saw what you were doing." Her face twisted with rage, and she took a step toward me, her eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I know exactly what I saw," I shot back, my voice shaking. "You're sick. Carla, what the hell is wrong with you?" Her expression changed then, shifting from anger to desperation. She looked at me with pleading eyes, her voice softening. "Please," she whispered, "you can't tell anyone. You don't understand." "I understand enough," I said, my voice cold. "You're cheating on my dad, with a horse." The words felt surreal as they left my mouth, and for a moment Carla just stared at me, her face pale. Then, to my shock, she started to cry. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part of me was disgusted by the sight of her. "I'm sorry," she whispered between sobs. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It's not what you think." I stood there watching her cry, unsure of what to believe. Could there be any explanation for what I had seen? Was there some twisted reasoning behind her actions, or was she just trying to manipulate me into staying quiet? If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the Betrayal Tales and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming shocking stories. And if you like this story, comment your opinion in the comment section. The next few days were unbearable. My dad was still away, and Carla acted as if nothing had happened, avoiding me whenever possible. I couldn't look at her without feeling sick, and the tension in the house was suffocating. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell my dad? Should I go to the authorities? Would anyone even believe me? One night, I finally broke down. I went online and posted about the situation on Reddit, hoping that maybe someone out there had been through something similar or could offer advice. The responses were mixed. Some people were horrified, telling me to get out of the house immediately and call the police. Others thought I was making the whole thing up for attention. A few suggested that Carla needed help, that maybe this was some kind of mental illness, but none of the responses made me feel any better. I was still stuck in a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up from it. The next morning, I woke up to find a message from my dad. He was coming home earlier than expected. My stomach twisted into knots. What was I going to do? Could I really tell him what I had seen? Would he even believe me? And what would happen if he didn't? When my dad finally arrived home, Carla greeted him with a smile, as if nothing had happened. I watched them from the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't stand the thought of keeping this secret any longer, but I also didn't want to destroy my dad's life. He loved Carla, and despite everything, I didn't want to be the one to tear their marriage apart. That evening, I finally worked up the courage to confront my dad. We were sitting in the living room, watching TV, when I turned to him, my heart racing. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking, "I need to tell you something." He looked at me, concern etched on his face. "What is it, son?" I hesitated, my mind racing. How could I possibly explain what I had seen? How could I tell him that his wife, the woman he loved, was cheating on him in the most unimaginable way? But before I could speak, Carla walked into the room, her eyes locking onto mine. She must have sensed what I was about to do, because she gave me a look that sent chills down my spine, a look of warning, of desperation. I froze, my words catching in my throat. Could I really do this? Could I really destroy my dad's happiness, even if it was built on a lie? In the end, I couldn't do it. I swallowed my words and shook my head. "Never mind," I muttered, my heart sinking. "It's nothing." My dad gave me a puzzled look, but didn't press the issue. Carla, however, smiled at me, a smile that made my skin crawl. She knew she had won. She knew I wasn't strong enough to expose her secret. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I could keep this secret buried. The following days were tense, with an unspoken tension building between Carla and me. She knew that I was holding her secret, and the knowledge of that gave her power. I couldn't escape the suffocating pressure of it all. My dad, completely unaware, continued with his usual routine, oblivious to the darkness that had seeped into our home. Every time I looked at him, my guilt multiplied. How could I let this go on? I started avoiding Carla more and more, staying out late and spending as little time in the house as possible. I felt trapped, like a prisoner in my own home. Whenever I caught a glimpse of her, that sickening smile would appear, a reminder that she controlled the narrative. She had manipulated me, forced me into silence, and now I was carrying the weight of her betrayal. One afternoon, while I was scrolling through Reddit, desperately searching for similar stories, I stumbled upon a thread about difficult family situations. Most of them were about cheating, emotional abuse, and betrayal within families, but none of them seemed as twisted as mine. As I read through the comments, I realized how many people were trapped in toxic situations with no way out, silenced by the shame of their circumstances. It made me feel slightly less alone, but it didn't give me a solution. I began considering my options more seriously. I could still tell my dad, but the thought of how much pain that would cause him haunted me. He had already gone through so much with my mom's death, and the last thing I wanted was to destroy what little happiness he had found again. But every time I thought about keeping quiet, I remembered that image of Carla in the stable, and my stomach would churn. One evening I came home later than usual, hoping to avoid any confrontation with Carla. The house was dark and quiet, and I thought maybe she had gone to bed early. As I made my way upstairs, I heard a faint noise coming from outside, the unmistakable sound of hooves on the gravel. I froze in place, my heart racing. I didn't want to check. I didn't want to know, but something compelled me to head toward the stable once again. As I neared the stable, I heard Carla's voice, soft and low. It was the same whispering tone I had heard before, and it sent a shiver down my spine. My hands shook as I opened the door, bracing myself for whatever horror I was about to witness. And there she was, once again with Star, her hands moving across him in that same unsettling way. I couldn't take it anymore. My mind snapped. I burst into the stable, shouting, "What the hell are you doing, Carla?" She jumped back, her face twisted in a mixture of fear and rage. "What are you doing here?" she spat, her voice sharp and accusing. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm not the one who's doing something wrong," I shouted back. "This is sick. Carla, you need help." Carla's face paled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down and confess everything. But instead, she turned cold, her eyes narrowing. "If you tell anyone," she hissed, "I'll make sure you regret it. You think your dad will believe you. He'll think you're crazy. I'll tell him you've been acting strange, that you're the one who's been creeping around the stable. Who do you think he'll believe, his wife or his paranoid son?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just trying to keep me quiet. She was threatening to turn everything around on me, to make me look like the villain. My blood boiled with anger, but I knew she was right. My dad loved her, and if it came down to her word against mine, I wasn't sure what he'd believe. Feeling utterly defeated, I turned and stormed out of the stable, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked away, I could hear Carla's footsteps behind me, but she didn't say another word. She didn't need to. The damage was done. For the next few days, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Carla acted as though nothing had happened, going about her usual routines with that sickeningly sweet smile plastered on her face. My dad remained oblivious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. Carla's threat hung over me like a dark cloud, and I didn't know how much longer I could take it. I spent more time online, reading stories about people who had been blackmailed or coerced into keeping family secrets. Some of the stories were horrifying, but they made me realize something important. Staying silent was only making things worse. I had been forced into this position, but that didn't mean I had to remain there. I needed to find a way out, but I couldn't do it alone. That night, I reached out to a close friend of mine from college, someone I trusted completely. I didn't give all the details right away. I wasn't sure how to explain it, but I told him enough to get his advice. His reaction was one of shock and disbelief, but he didn't judge me. Instead, he offered to help me figure out a way to confront the situation without letting Carla control the narrative. If you like this story, Don't forget to subscribe to the Betrayal Tales for more jaw-dropping stories, and comment your opinion in the comment section below. With my friend's support, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could find a way to expose Carla without destroying my relationship with my dad. Maybe there was a way to reveal the truth without her twisting it back on me. A few days later, I decided to confront Carla once again, but this time I would be prepared. I couldn't risk her manipulating the situation any longer. With my phone discreetly recording in my pocket, I waited until my dad was out of the house and approached her in the kitchen. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. Carla looked up from whatever she was cooking, her expression instantly darkening. "I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish," she sneered. "You're not in control here. I am." "I don't care what you think," I said, my heart pounding. "What you're doing is wrong, and I won't let you keep manipulating me." She stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Neither do you," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the phone in my pocket, "because I'm not the same scared kid you think you can control." For a moment, Carla seemed caught off guard. She hadn't expected me to stand up to her, and I could see the uncertainty flicker in her eyes. But she quickly regained her composure, her smile returning. "Fine," she said, her voice cold and dismissive. "Tell your dad. See what happens. You'll lose everything." Her words stung, but I knew I couldn't back down now. I had the evidence I needed. All that was left was to decide how to use it. That night, I sat down with my dad, my heart racing. I played the recording for him, watching as the color drained from his face. He looked at me, then at Carla, who stood frozen in the doorway, her mask of control finally slipping. "I don't know what to say," my dad whispered, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "I didn't want to hurt you, but you needed to know the truth." For the first time in what felt like forever, Carla had nothing to say. The truth was out, and there was no going back.